Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Weekly Roar! Thanks for joining me in the Lion's Den for this week's watch party. Today I'm talking about another pivot as we continue with my series called Inevitable Change, Making Pivots in Your Leadership. Before I kick things off though, I'm Greg Storch and I'm the founder of Lion Enterprise, a leadership development and coaching business where I focus on helping organizations create winning cultures. I'm a certified professional coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. Hey, last week I was talking about yet another pivot where we changed focus from goals to growth. I spoke about why it was important to make that particular pivot, and I also gave you 5 ways to help change your mindset to be more growth-oriented instead of goal-driven. If you weren't able to catch the Weekly Roar last Wednesday, then just head over to my website, www.lion-enterprise.com. You can access all of my videos by going to the website and at the top of the page, access the Lion's Pride Library. Check out video number 74 for last week's session. The Lion's Pride Library is a free resource on my website that makes it easy for you to get more of the roar. Okay, let's talk about another potential pivot we might need to make. I don't know if you do or not. You're going to have to make that decision. But today, I wanted to talk to you about taking a different perspective of your leadership position. I'm going to share a little more with you about why leadership isn't so much about what we get from it as it is what we can give with it. I remember the 2 times that I was promoted to program manager and director with the IT company I was working for in the DC area. I always felt like a leader, and I was ready to lead those contracts that were assigned to me. I had seen the previous manager, and it was clear in my mind, these people needed me. I knew they were just going to follow me, and I knew they would rely on me for my direction and just be grateful for me. Boy, was I wrong. The contractors, all 156 of them, they were nice enough to me when I first started, but they certainly weren't just blindly following me at all. They had to see what I was made of. They wanted to know if they could trust me and if I truly cared about them. It took a little while, but when they saw me in action, I was able to gain influence with them relatively quickly. See, one of the benefits to gaining those promotions was working less in DC and more at the headquarters away from downtown DC. I had a nice, quiet office on the top floor of the building. As a program manager, I had an inside office, which meant my office was on the inside of the hallway, so it didn't have any windows, but it was my own office. I couldn't wait to promote to the executive level where I could move to an office just across the hallway with huge windows that overlooked Route 66. Now that I think about it, I was groomed in the Navy to always desire the benefits that came with promotions or selections. When I was in San Diego working at the Naval Dental Center at 32nd Street Naval Base, I was selected as Sailor of the Quarter on several occasions. With that accomplishment came special parking privileges and extra time off of work. And in 1996, I was selected not only as the Sailor of the Year at my duty station, but I went on to be selected as Sailor of the Year for all of Navy medicine. And with that selection came tons of perks, including a personal award and front row parking spot for the following year. I also got to go to Washington, D.C. from San Diego for an entire week, where the other two competing sailors were taken to fancy dinners, and we were all introduced to the admirals at Navy Medicine. You know, it's no wonder that having that type of influence for so long would result in me having a pattern where I focused a lot on what I could receive from these selections and these promotions. It really turned me into a person who was focused on himself as a leader. Whenever I was selected for something or whenever I was promoted to a new position, I wanted to know what I would get for it. Is there another parking space? Is there time off? How about a bonus? What about that office with the view? It wasn't until probably the past 5 years when I grew and matured as a leader, and I was able to start making the pivot away from what's in it for me to what can I do for others. You've heard me speak about the shift from being selfish to selfless, and this was part of that journey. Today, I call myself a servant leader, a leader who solely focuses on others first. But it took me time to get there, and I only made that pivot within the last 5 years. Maybe you have already made that pivot in your own life, but if you're still considering things that you get as a leader, the perks of your position, then perhaps you want to consider this pivot. When you change your focus to what you can give as a leader, you'll quickly realize that you have to give things up. There's a price to pay. But if you want to become the best leader you can be, then making the pivot away from what's in it for you to what can you do for them will be necessary, and you'll have to be willing to pay the price. So I guess at this point, you got to ask yourself, am I willing to pay that price? Maybe you already have. And if so, then what I'm going to talk about here next will be familiar to you. But if not, then listen up to some of the common things that leaders can expect to have to deal with when they commit to making this pivot. You know, John Maxwell has a great saying that you have to give up to go up. And that's what this is all about. What we have to give up as leaders is what is known as the cost of leadership. It's the price that is charged to you to assume the role of a leader. And that's probably the first thing we should recognize as leaders, especially if we plan to pivot or if we want to pivot and change our focus to what we can give as leaders, how we can consider how our decisions will affect others. Think about all of the accomplishments you've ever experienced in your own life. I bet it's safe to say that none of them came without hard work and sacrifice. Of course not. Accomplishing anything worthwhile takes effort. It's a struggle, just like trudging up a hill, but you do it because the struggle is worth it. Now, think of an accomplishment you've enjoyed in your life where you didn't exert any effort. You just coasted along and it just happened. Yeah, you probably can't do that, can you? If you can, then maybe it's because someone else paid the price for you. The best things in life are not free. There's a price that you have to pay. And if you agree to pay the toll, success can be yours. A leader's job is to know what lies ahead and to know that there will be sacrifice to achieve success. Leaders have to believe that they will make it to the top of that mountain. At the same time, they understand their current situations and their reality that they're working in. All of those challenges that they face in order to be able to ultimately achieve success. No matter what it is you desire in life, whether it's personal or professional achievement, the first thing you must remember is to face the reality of the current situation and be honest about it. Don't hide from it or sweep it under the carpet. You also need to share the reality with those you're leading. The sooner you do it, the better. You also have to be willing to pay the price. Give up whatever is asked of you in order to make it up that mountain. See, the sooner you get started and the more you're willing to pay for it, the higher you will climb. Another thing you might have to deal with to make this pivot is understanding that if you decide you're going to take your followers on the journey up that mountain, you must go first. Why? Because leaders see things before and more than others do. And more importantly, they take action quicker than others do. We're willing to give up to go up. That's what makes us leaders. The climb will exact a toll on us, and we must be willing to pay it. You know, going first isn't an easy thing to do, especially when the road ahead is uncertain. But it's the leaders who go forth despite that who can easily say, "Come this way, follow me." And that's why this is another cost that you're going to have to pay going first. Having to blaze the trail is definitely not a perk to leadership, is it? It can be filled with uncertainty and doubt. So choosing to forge ahead anyway is another price to pay for being the leader. When a leader commits to paying that price and blazes that trail, they create a path for everyone else to follow. It makes their climb behind the leader much easier for them. And that's what leaders do, right? It doesn't matter if they sit in the C-suite or what type of company car they're driving or the size of their office and the enormous view they have. None of those things help a leader to climb a mountain. Making the climb, cutting the trail, finding the top of the mountain, that's what inspires your followers, not having any of that other stuff. Leaders should always be ready, willing, and able to climb the mountain first, setting an example for their followers to emulate. If you want to become the best leader you can be, this is another price you'll have to be willing to pay to do it. Which brings me to one more thing I wanted to share with you. A lot of times I'll get asked about building social media presence by new business owners or entrepreneurs. And they'll also ask me about how I built an audience. Every time that I get those questions, my answer is always the same. And one of the common factors is I tell them that they have to be ready to never stop once they make the decision to start. Once they make that commitment to begin, they have to remain consistent. They can't stop. They can't rest. They can't take a break. As soon as they do that, they get passed up by the people who are more consistent than they are. And that is another thing that leaders have to be willing to do. They have to remain consistent. Being consistent's not easy. It's another price that we have to pay as leaders. Being consistent as a leader means that you never get to stop climbing uphill. You see, just because you continue to pay the price of leadership doesn't mean you get time off for good behavior. You don't get to sit and rest before continuing on. We have to give up to go up, and we have to give up even more to stay up. The only way it will ever stop is when you stop. Leaders who can sustain the consistency will rise above others who are not as committed for the long haul. And those leaders deserve to reap the rewards of reaching the top of the mountain. You know, if I keep using this mountain climbing analogy and the price of consistency, having to keep going and going without stopping, think of it like this. The minute you decide to stop the climb and set up base camp, the person behind you will take the lead and pass you right by. If you are willing to consistently show up, work hard, accept change, try, fail, try again. If you continue to pay the price for leadership instead of focusing on all the things that you'll get as a result of being the leader, then you are sure to reach the top and enjoy the fruits of your labor. You have to be in it to win it. You know, being a leader sounds great, especially when you talk about all the bennies you might get from it, or at least get from the position. But the real payoff doesn't come from the position or the perks. It comes from your willingness to pay the price, to set the example for others, to blaze that trail and show the way to the top. So the climb for everyone else is easier than it was for you. That's leadership. And leadership is worthwhile. And like I said at the beginning of today's session, anything worthwhile is all uphill. So I'm going to ask it again. Are you willing to pay the price of leadership? If so, you may have to pivot away from focusing on what benefits you gain from being the leader to what price you have to pay to stay the leader. If you want to pivot, then I mentioned 3 things that you better take out of the leadership wallet and get ready to pay the price for. First, you'll have to pay the price of confronting reality, because leadership is hard and being a successful leader is all uphill. Second, you'll have to pay to lead the way. You're going to have to serve as the example for others to emulate. And this is another cost that must be paid in full. And finally, the third price that you should expect to pay is the price of being consistent. Because once you start, you can't stop. You're going to have to commit to consistency. And once you do, you have to just keep climbing. You know, sometimes you're ahead, sometimes you're behind, but the race is long. And in the end, it's really only with yourself. All right, everybody. There is yet another pivot for you to consider from inevitable change, making pivots in your leadership. I want to just take a second again and just thank you. Thanks for tuning in again for the Weekly Roar. I hope you guys know how much I appreciate your support. And of course, remember, I would love for you to help me to continue to influence other leaders and help them to grow by sharing out the link to the Weekly Roar video that I'm going to post here after this watch party's over. I'm going to be back here next week in the Lion's Den speaking about another pivot that we can all make in our leadership. Next week, I want to talk about making the pivot away from being a people pleaser. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why pleasing people is not leading them. I hope you'll join me. All right, everybody, until we meet again next week, remember, be powerful, but stay poised just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.